Riches don't belong to the hardest workers. If that were true, teachers and laborers would be billionaires. But they're not. Wealth follows power. The ones who control, who bend the rules, who dare first. Machiavelli exposed this centuries ago. Fortune rewards the bold, not the obedient. Most people stay poor because they're stuck in the wrong game. The question is, are you ready to stop serving and start ruling? If hard work made people rich, slaves would have been kings. Let that sink in for a moment. Think about the hardest working people you know. The nurse working double shifts, the construction worker under the burning Sunday, the teacher grading papers until midnight, the single parent juggling 3 jobs just to keep the lights on. Are they rich? No. And it's not because they're lazy. It's not because they lack discipline. It's because the entire system is designed to reward something else entirely. Something most people refuse to see. Hard work is a virtue. Society drills that into your head from childhood. Work hard, play by the rules, and you'll be rewarded. But look around. The hardest workers are often the poorest. Meanwhile, those who work less, who delegate, who strategize, who control the board instead of moving the pieces, they accumulate wealth effortlessly. Machiavelli understood this 500 years ago. He watched princes rise and fall. He saw laborers break their backs while merchants built empires. And he concluded one brutal truth: effort without strategy is just exhaustion. Hard work keeps you alive. It pays your rent, it feeds your family, but it doesn't make you rich. It makes you useful. And useful people are rewarded just enough to keep them working. That's not freedom, that's a cage. A cage painted gold, so you don't realize you're trapped. The world operates on a simple principle. Value isn't determined by effort. It's determined by scarcity and leverage. A man can dig a ditch for 12 hours and earn $50. Another man can sign a contract in 12 minutes and earn 50 million. Same time, different games. You see, society needs workers. It needs people who believe in the fairness of effort. Because if everyone understood the real rules, the system would collapse. So they teach you to trade time for money. They call it honest work. They call it dignity. And it is until you realize you're trading the only non-renewable resource you have, your time. The poor work for money. The rich make money work for them. The powerful, they create the systems that generate money while they sleep. Hard work is the baseline. It's what gets you into the game. But it's not what wins the game. Winning requires something else. Something most people are afraid to admit they want. Power, not brute strength, not loud dominance, but the quiet, calculated ability to shape outcomes, to influence decisions, to control resources, to position yourself where the flow of wealth naturally moves toward you, not away from you. Machiavelli didn't write The Prince for laborers. He wrote it for rulers, for those who understood that fortune favors preparation, strategy, and the courage to act when others hesitate. He knew that the world doesn't reward good intentions, it rewards results. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people will never be rich because they're playing the wrong game. They're competing in a contest where the rules are rigged against them. They're told to work harder, to be more productive, to hustle. And they do. They burn themselves out chasing a finish line that keeps moving further away. Meanwhile, the wealthy aren't running that race at all. They're building the track, they're selling the tickets, they're investing in the infrastructure. And when the race is over, they collect the profits. This isn't about morality. It's not about fairness. It's about reality. And reality is indifferent to how hard you work. It responds to leverage, to positioning, to control. So ask yourself, are you building something that compounds? Or are you just trading hours for dollars? Are you creating systems? Or are you stuck inside someone else's system? Are you learning the rules of power? Or are you pretending they don't exist? Because ignoring the truth doesn't make you noble, it makes you vulnerable. Money itself obeys a master, and that master is power. You think money is neutral, that it flows to whoever earns it? No, money flows to whoever controls it, and control is the essence of power. The worker trades his sweat for a wage. The master trades his decisions for empires. Let me paint you a picture. Two men wake up at the same time. Both are ambitious. Both want wealth. One goes to his job, works 10 hours, earns his paycheck. The other spends 10 hours making decisions who to hire, what to invest in, which market to enter, which partnership to form. At the end of the day, the first man has traded his time for money. The second man has multiplied his time through others. This is the first law of wealth. Whoever controls the most decisions controls the most resources. Machiavelli observed this in Renaissance Italy. The princes who held power weren't always the smartest or the strongest. They were the ones who controlled the flow of information, resources, and loyalty. They understood that wealth isn't just accumulated, it's commanded. Think about it. A CEO doesn't produce the product. A general doesn't fight the battle. A director doesn't act in every scene. But they control the outcome because they control the structure. They decide the strategy. They allocate resources. They set the vision, and everyone else executes. That's power. And power is what creates sustainable wealth. The employee mindset says, how can I get paid more for my time? The power mindset says, how can I create value that doesn't depend on my time? One is addition. The other is multiplication. Let's be clear. There's nothing wrong with being an employee. But if your goal is wealth, you must understand the fundamental difference between earning money and creating it. Earning is transactional. Creating is architectural. When you earn, you're dependent. Your income stops when you stop. You're a cog in a machine, valuable but replaceable. When you create, you're independent. Your income becomes detached from your hours. You build systems, assets, networks, things that generate value whether you're awake or asleep. And here's where most people get stuck. They confuse effort with impact. They think because they're working hard, they deserve wealth. But the market doesn't care about effort. It cares about results. It cares about who solves the problem, who takes the risk, who bears the responsibility. Power isn't about being cruel or ruthless. It's about being effective. It's about understanding that wealth flows where it's directed, and direction requires control. The rich don't hope for opportunities. They create them. They don't wait for permission. They seize authority. They don't ask if they deserve wealth. They position themselves to receive it. This is the uncomfortable truth. Wealth is not distributed fairly. It's not supposed to be. It's distributed according to leverage, according to risk, according to control. And those who refuse to acknowledge this spend their entire lives wondering why they're working so hard and getting nowhere. Machiavelli wrote, "It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. But more than that, it's better to be powerful than liked, because power gives you options. Power gives you freedom. Power allows you to shape your reality instead of reacting to someone else's." So the question becomes, are you building power, or are you just busy? Are you gaining control, or are you giving it away every day to someone who pays you just enough to keep you showing up? Money follows power, always has, always will. Most people wait for more time, more money, the perfect moment. But fortune doesn't wait. It belongs to the daring. Machiavelli had a word for this. Virtue. Not virtue in the moral sense, but the ability to act decisively in the face of uncertainty, to impose your will on chaos, to move when others freeze. You see, fortune is like a river. When it's calm, you can build dams, dig channels, redirect its flow. But when it floods, it sweeps away everything in its path. The same is true of opportunity. When conditions are favorable, the bold prepare. And when the moment arrives, they strike. But most people do the opposite. They wait for certainty. They want guarantees. They want to know they'll succeed before they even begin. And so they wait, and watch others seize what they were too afraid to claim. Let me tell you about two men who started with nothing. The first man was cautious. He saved every dollar. He avoided risk. He worked diligently, climbed the ladder slowly, and after 30 years, he had a modest pension and a small house. He was safe, comfortable, average. The second man was different. He saw an opportunity, a market gap, a growing trend, a problem that needed solving. He didn't have much capital. He didn't have connections, but he moved. He borrowed money. He convinced others to invest. He worked 18-hour days, not because someone told him to, but because he was building something that could scale. He failed twice, lost everything, started again, and by the time the first man was retiring with his pension, the second man had built a business worth 8 figures. Same starting point, different mindsets. One waited for safety, the other created it. This is the law of fortune. It rewards action over analysis, execution over perfection, speed over security. Now, I'm not saying be reckless. I'm saying understand that risk is inevitable. The only question is whether you take calculated risks toward building something, or you accept the slow risk of mediocrity, the risk that you'll reach the end of your life, having never truly played the game. Machiavelli observed that successful princes weren't necessarily the most talented. They were the ones who acted when the moment demanded it. They didn't wait for permission. They didn't need consensus. They saw the opening and moved. Consider this. Every major fortune in history was built by someone who moved before the crowd. Rockefeller in oil, Carnegie in steel, Ford in automobiles, Gates in software, Bezos in e-commerce, Musk in electric vehicles and space. None of them waited for the perfect moment. They created the moment. And here's what they understood that most people don't. The cost of inaction is higher than the cost of failure. Failure teaches you. Inaction teaches you nothing. Failure moves you forward, even if painfully. Inaction keeps you stuck, wondering what could have been. Think about your own life. How many opportunities have you let slip by because you weren't ready? Because you needed more time, more knowledge, more resources? And where did those opportunities go? They went to someone who was willing to be imperfect, to be incomplete, to be scared but move anyway. Fortune doesn't care about your feelings. It doesn't care if you're nervous or unprepared. It arrives, it lingers for a moment, and then it's gone. And it goes to whoever has the courage to grab it. This is why poverty persists across generations. It's not just about money, it's about mindset. The poor are taught to avoid risk, to play it safe, to be grateful for stability. And stability is fine if you want to stay where you are. But if you want to rise, you must embrace uncertainty. You must be willing to bet on yourself when no one else will. The rich teach their children differently. They teach them to recognize opportunity, to calculate risk, to move quickly, to fail forward, because they understand that fortune is a game of timing, and timing requires boldness. Machiavelli also said this: fortune is a woman, and it is necessary, if you wish to master her, to conquer her by force. Controversial? Yes, but strip away the metaphor, and you get the core truth. Fortune must be seized. It doesn't come to the passive. It doesn't reward hesitation. It bows to those who take it. So here's the question you need to ask yourself. Are you waiting for the perfect moment, or are you creating it? Are you preparing endlessly, or are you moving? Are you analyzing risk, or are you avoiding it entirely? Because the world is full of smart, capable, hard-working people who never achieve anything significant, not because they lack talent, but because they lack the willingness to act before they feel ready. And the brutal irony, you'll never feel ready. No one does. The successful just move anyway. Fortune favors the bold, not the reckless, but the bold. Those who prepare in private and execute in public. Those who understand that the greatest risk is living a life of what-ifs. Most people push with bare hands and wonder why nothing moves. The rich, they find a lever. This is the secret that separates the wealthy from everyone else. It's not intelligence, it's not luck, it's leverage. Archimedes said, "Give me a lever long enough and a fulcrum on which to place it, and I shall move the world." He understood a principle that most people ignore. Force without leverage is just effort, but force with leverage is power. Let me break this down. There are 4 types of leverage, and the rich use all of them simultaneously. First, money leverage. This is the most obvious, but the least understood. The rich don't use their own money to get richer. They use other people's money. Banks, investors, partners, customers who prepay. They take capital, multiply it through a business or investment, and return a portion while keeping the profit. Think about real estate. A man buys a property worth $1 million, but he doesn't use $1 million of his own money. He puts down 200,000 and borrows 800,000 from the bank. The property appreciates. Rental income covers the mortgage. A few years later, the property is worth 1.5 million. He sells, pays off the loan, and walks away with 700,000 in profit, having only risked 200,000 of his own capital. That's money leverage. He used the bank's money to amplify his returns. Meanwhile, someone who saves $1 million and buys a property outright makes the same profit but took 5 times longer to accumulate the capital. Same result, longer timeline, less leverage. The wealthy understand this. Money is a tool, not a trophy. You don't hoard it, you deploy it, you make it work. And when you can deploy other people's money instead of your own, you've unlocked exponential growth. Second, people leverage. This is where most people get stuck. They think success is about personal productivity, working harder, being more disciplined. But that's a trap. There are only 24 hours in a day. Your output is capped by your time. But when you leverage people, when you build teams, hire employees, delegate tasks, create systems, you break through that ceiling. A business owner doesn't serve every customer. He hires salespeople. A CEO doesn't manage every project. She hires managers. A director doesn't edit every scene. He hires a team. The principle is the same: multiplication through delegation. Machiavelli understood this. A prince who tried to do everything himself would fail, but a prince who assembled loyal, capable lieutenants, he could rule an empire. It wasn't about his personal capacity. It was about his ability to organize force. People leverage is how you scale, but it requires something most people avoid: giving up control of the process while maintaining control of the outcome. You don't micromanage. You set the vision, establish standards, and empower others to execute. And when they do, you gain time, the most valuable resource, while they gain income and experience. Everyone wins. Third, knowledge leverage. Information is power, always has been, but not just any information, the right information, at the right time, applied correctly. The rich invest heavily in knowledge, not just formal education, but strategic insight. They know market trends before the public. They understand regulations before they're enforced. They build relationships with people who have access to resources, capital, and opportunities. Think about insider trading laws. Why do they exist? Because knowing something before everyone else is so powerful that it's literally illegal in certain contexts. That's how valuable knowledge leverage is. But you don't need illegal information. You just need better information than your competition. You need to read more, learn faster, test quicker, understand patterns, recognize opportunities others miss because they're not paying attention. Machiavelli advised princes to surround themselves with wise counselors. Why? Because one mind, no matter how brilliant, is limited. But a mind that synthesizes the insights of many, that's exponential intelligence. That's knowledge leverage. And here's the key. Knowledge doesn't just mean knowing facts. It means knowing how to apply them. It means understanding human nature, market psychology, timing, positioning. It means seeing the game within the game. Fourth, attention leverage. This is the newest form of leverage, but it's becoming the most powerful. In the age of information, attention is currency. Whoever controls attention controls perception, and perception shapes reality. Think about brands. Why does a pair of shoes cost $50 at one store and $500 at another? Same materials, same manufacturing process. Different brand, different story, different perception. That's attention leverage. The expensive brand has captured mindshare. They've associated their product with status, quality, exclusivity, and people pay for that perception. Social media influencers understand this. A person with 1 million followers can launch a product and generate millions in revenue overnight, not because the product is revolutionary, but because they have attention. And attention converts to trust, and trust converts to transactions. Reputation is attention leverage in its purest form. When people know your name, respect your expertise, and trust your judgment, doors open effortlessly. Deals come to you. Opportunities find you. You're no longer pushing, you're attracting. Machiavelli wrote extensively about reputation. He advised rulers to cultivate a public image carefully to be seen as strong, just, and decisive, because how you're perceived determines how you're treated. A prince with a weak reputation invites rebellion. A prince with a formidable reputation maintains order without constant force. This is why the rich invest in personal branding, public relations, and strategic visibility. They understand that being good at something isn't enough. People need to know you're good, and they need to believe it so deeply that they advocate for you. Now, here's the crucial point. These 4 types of leverage don't work in isolation. They compound. You use knowledge leverage to identify an opportunity. You use people leverage to execute it. You use money leverage to scale it. And you use attention leverage to dominate the market. The poor use none of these. They trade time for money, work alone, avoid debt, and stay invisible. They push with bare hands and wonder why nothing moves. The middle class uses 1 or 2. They might leverage a mortgage to buy a house or hire a few employees. But they don't stack leverage. They don't multiply it. The wealthy use all 4 simultaneously. And that's why wealth compounds exponentially for them while everyone else struggles linearly. This is the game, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. So the question is, what leverage are you building right now? Are you acquiring knowledge that others don't have? Are you building systems that multiply your effort? Are you strategically positioning yourself in networks of influence? Are you cultivating a reputation that opens doors? Or are you still pushing alone, hoping effort will be enough? Because the truth is brutal but liberating. You don't need to work harder. You need to work with leverage. And leverage is what separates those who survive from those who thrive. Getting rich is easy. Staying rich and being remembered, that's the real game. The poor leave memories. The rich leave money. But the powerful, they leave history. Let me explain what I mean. Anyone can get lucky. Hit a lottery, inherit wealth, catch a market boom. But sustaining wealth across generations, that requires something deeper than luck. It requires structure, strategy, vision, and most importantly, it requires thinking beyond your own lifetime. Machiavelli didn't just study contemporary princes. He studied the empires of Rome, the kingdoms of antiquity, the dynasties that lasted centuries. And he asked a critical question: why do some powers endure while others collapse the moment their founder dies? The answer? Legacy systems. A legacy isn't just about leaving money to your children. That's inheritance. Legacy is about creating something that continues to generate value, influence, and impact long after you're gone. It's about embedding your principles into systems that outlive you. Think about the great families of history. The Medici, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers. They didn't just accumulate wealth, they built institutions, banks, universities, trusts, foundations, networks of influence that span generations. Their wealth grew not because each generation worked harder, but because the structure was designed to compound automatically. This is the difference between money and power. Money can be spent, power can be inherited, money can be lost in a bad investment. Power, embedded in systems, becomes nearly impossible to dismantle. Most people never think this way. They think in terms of their own lifespan. I want to retire comfortably. I want to provide for my kids. These are fine goals, but they're limited. They're transactional. They don't compound across time. The powerful think in dynasties. They ask, what will my grandchildren inherit? What values, what systems, what networks will still be generating opportunity 50 years from now? How do I create something that doesn't just survive my death but thrives because of the foundation I built? Let me give you an example. A man builds a successful business. He sells it before he dies and leaves his children $10 million. That's wealth. But without financial education, without understanding how to manage and grow capital, that money is often gone within 2 generations. Studies show that 70% of wealthy families lose their wealth by the 2nd generation. 90% lose it by the 3rd. Why? Because money without the mindset to sustain it is just temporary. It's a resource that depletes, but a system, a business that continues to operate, an investment fund that continues to grow, a network of relationships that continue to open doors, that's a legacy. That's power that persists. Now let's talk about something even more profound: intellectual legacy. The wealthiest people in history aren't just rich. They're remembered. Carnegie, Nobel, Ford, Rockefeller. Why? Because they attached their names to institutions that serve the public good. Libraries, prizes, universities, foundations. They understood that money alone doesn't grant immortality, but shaping culture, advancing knowledge, influencing society that makes you unforgettable. Machiavelli himself is proof of this. He never ruled a kingdom, he never amassed great wealth. But 500 years later, we're still quoting him. Why? Because he embedded his ideas into the fabric of political thought. He created an intellectual legacy that transcends his mortal life. This is the highest form of power, to shape how people think, even centuries after you're gone. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. I'm not trying to build a dynasty. I just want financial freedom. Fair enough. But understand this. Even if you're not thinking about legacy, the systems you build today will determine the trajectory of those who come after you. Your children, your community, the people influenced by your example. You can build something extractive, something that benefits only you and disappears when you do. Or you can build something generative, something that creates value continuously, that empowers others, that solves problems at scale. The first is selfish, the second is strategic. And ironically, the second often makes you wealthier because systems that serve others attract resources naturally. Let me give you another lens on this. Think about why corporations outlive individuals. A company like Coca-Cola has existed for over 100 years. Its founders are long dead, but the system continues. Why? Because it's not dependent on any single person. It has processes, structures, brands, distribution networks, all designed to perpetuate themselves. You can build a personal version of this. Not a corporation necessarily, but a portfolio of assets, financial, intellectual, social, that continue to generate value independent of your daily involvement. Real estate that appreciates and produces rental income. Investments that compound. Businesses that run on systems, not your labor. Content that educates and influences long after you've created it. Relationships that open doors for your children. This is how the rich think, not just about getting paid today, but about building structures that pay forever. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people will be forgotten within 2 generations. Their grandchildren won't know their struggles, their sacrifices, their stories. Because they didn't build anything permanent. They didn't create system. They didn't document their wisdom. They didn't establish anything worth remembering. But you can be different. You can build something that echoes. Machiavelli understood that a prince's greatest fear should not be death, but irrelevance. To be forgotten is to have never truly lived. But to be remembered, to have your name associated with something meaningful, that's immortality. So ask yourself, what are you building that will outlast you? What systems are you creating that will continue to generate value for those you care about? What knowledge are you preserving? What principles are you embedding into the next generation? Because getting rich is the first game, staying rich is the second, but building a legacy, that's the final game. The game where you stop playing for yourself and start playing for eternity. And when you understand that, everything changes. Your decisions become bigger, your vision becomes longer, your impact becomes deeper. You stop chasing quick wins and start constructing monuments. The poor think in days, the middle class thinks in years, the rich think in decades, but the powerful, they think in centuries. And that's the difference between leaving money and leaving history. But here's something most people miss about legacy. It's not just about what you leave behind. It's about what you prevent from happening. A strong legacy protects future generations from starting over. It gives them a foundation, a launching pad, advantages that compound over time. Think about it this way. If you're born into a family with no wealth, no connections, no knowledge of how money works, you start at zero, maybe even negative if there's debt. You spend the first half of your life just trying to reach baseline stability. But if you're born into a family with established wealth, proven systems, and embedded wisdom, you start at 10. You can take bigger risks because you have a safety net. You can pursue higher ambitions because you're not worried about survival. That's generational leverage, and it's the most powerful form of leverage there is. The wealthy understand this instinctively. That's why they create trusts. That's why they invest in their children's education, not just academically, but financially and socially. That's why they introduce their kids to networks of influence early. They're not just giving their children money, they're giving them momentum. And momentum is everything. A person with momentum can weather failures that would destroy someone starting from scratch. They can take 10 swings instead of one. They can learn from expensive mistakes because they have the resources to recover. They can wait for the right opportunity instead of being forced to take the first one that comes along. This is why legacy thinking is so powerful. It's not about ego, it's about acceleration. Every generation should start further ahead than the last. That's how dynasties are built. That's how real power accumulates over time. But legacy isn't just financial. In fact, the most important legacy you can leave isn't money at all. It's mindset. It's teaching the next generation how to think about power, about value, about leverage, because money can be lost. Markets crash, businesses fail. But if you've instilled the right mental frameworks, your descendants can rebuild anything. This is what separates temporary wealth from enduring power. Temporary wealth is fragile. It depends on circumstances, on luck, on timing. But enduring power is resilient. It adapts, it evolves. It survives because it's rooted in principles, not just practices. Machiavelli studied this extensively. He looked at why some families maintained power for centuries, while others rose and fell within a generation. And what he found was this: the families that endured were the ones who institutionalized their advantage. They didn't rely on individual brilliance. They created systems that produced brilliance consistently. They built academies to educate their children. They established codes of conduct to maintain reputation. They formed alliances strategically. They diversified their assets. They documented their knowledge. They mentored the next generation not just in what to do, but in how to think. This is the blueprint for legacy, and it's available to anyone willing to think beyond their own lifetime. So let me ask you again, what are you building that will matter in 50 years, in 100 years? What decisions are you making today that will echo through generations? Because most people never ask these questions. They're too focused on the immediate, on paying bills, on getting through the week. And I understand that. Survival is real. But if you never lift your eyes beyond survival, you'll never build anything that transcends it. The powerful play a different game entirely. They think in chapters, not days. They build for epochs, not quarters. They understand that true wealth isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in influence, in options, in the ability to shape outcomes long after you're gone. And that's the final truth about legacy. It's not about living forever. It's about mattering forever. It's about creating ripples that turn into waves. It's about planting trees whose shade you'll never sit under, but whose fruit your great-grandchildren will enjoy. That's power, real power, the kind that doesn't fade when you do. So here we are. Fortune doesn't wait. Power doesn't apologize. Legacy doesn't forgive the timid. You've heard the truth now. You know the rules. You understand the game. The only question left is, what will you do with this knowledge? Will you go back to the illusion? Convince yourself that hard work alone is enough? That if you just put in more hours, more effort, more sweat, somehow the world will reward you fairly? Or will you accept reality? That wealth flows to power. That power flows to leverage. That leverage flows to those bold enough to seize it. That legacy flows to those wise enough to build it. The choice is yours. Stay invisible, comfortable in your predictability, safe in your mediocrity, forgotten in your compliance. Or step into the game where history remembers your name. Fortune favors the bold. Power respects the strategic. And legacy immortalizes the relentless. The world is waiting, not for your permission, but for your move. What will it be?